Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the War Room. Today we'll be talking about the Hogs, the most important position on the field. I'm talking about the offensive lineman. Again, as always, it's myself and Nate, and we are joined by Donovan and Matty V. How we doing, gentlemen?
Doing
Always
great.
good. Feeling good.
Yep. Glad to be on.
There we go. So if you joined us last week, you know we had the linebacker segment. We spent a lot of great time with Donovan, but again, we'll leave the floor to these gentlemen to introduce themselves before we get into some great content here. So first, the returning veteran at this point, Donovan.
Yeah. What's up, guys? Great to be on again. My name is Donovan, former O lineman at Miami, Ohio University, and just really excited to be on here, especially to talk about the Hogs. It's my creed and my passion in this game.
What's up, everyone? Matty V, Matt Valdovinos, also known as MV Scouting. You can find me on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok now. Trying to get that going, get that content up. Also super excited to talk about the offensive line. I didn't get to play it in college, but I did play it in high school. It is far and away my favorite position. It's always the position I start with. So I'm super excited to talk about this because I think it's a huge thing.
There we go. I think your TikTok conversation might be another segment we might need to dive into at some point. But hey, man, we'll dive right into it, man. Like I said, we're gonna talk about the old lineman, but as I always say, before we can get to where we want to go, we got to recap on what we had. All right. So the 2020 season for us started off a little rocky early on, right? There was a rotation wheel at lineman, especially at left tackle. We didn't know who was gonna come in and start. Was it gonna be Christensen or Cornelius Lucas? In the beginning, but Lucas was able to hold that spot down, right? We're talking about a team that started off 29th in the preseason, but made its way all the way by the end of the season to the sixth best ranked offensive line in the entire NFL, right? So then you look at each one individually between Morgan Moses, Brandon Sherritt, Chase Roulier, help me out. I don't want to butcher his name. Schweitzer. I do apologize. Wes Schweitzer. And again, Cornelius Lucas. All five of them individuals ended within the top 20 PFF individually graded at their respective positions. All right. So you're talking about a relatively strong offensive line, right? Although they did give up 3.1 sacks per game, there's an opportunity here at 19 for us to get better at this position. All right. We don't have a strong swing tackle. If you look at Jaron Christian, Morgan Moses is really an injury away, it seems like every game, right? So when you start to break down this team position by position, there is an opportunity here at 19 where we could possibly get better or early on some point in this draft for us, right? So as we kind of look at this draft class overall, just what are your high level thoughts before we get individually into this 2021 class perspective at the offensive lineman? And Nate, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so the big thing they talk about this year is depth at the O line. So last year, I mean, you're talking about one of the most top heavy classes we've seen at tackle in a really long time. There was, I believe, 6 offensive tackles taken in round 1 and 4 taken, or is it 5? No, yeah. 4 offensive tackles taken before pick 13. That's the second time that's happened in the past 36 years. So it kind of shows you the depth of the position and how talented they were. But after that, you're looking at kind of a fall off, right? There was only 1 tackle taken in round 2 in 2020. And then overall, they only had 11 tackles taken in the first 3 rounds. This year, we're looking at least 14 tackles being projected to go in the first 3 rounds. So you're seeing a little bit of a jump. And I think you're going to see more tackles go in round 2. I think that's where the strength of the class, you're really going to see it play out, is round 2 and then kind of the beginning of round 3. But I'd love to get your guys' take on that as well. Start with Matt. Like, what do you see in this class compared to last year?
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, last year at the top, especially with Tristan Wirfs and Jedrick Wills both being kind of the consensus guys, it was almost, I would say probably 80% of people were one of those 2 guys as their top ranked tackle. I was a Tristan Wirfs guy. I had Jedrick Wills as OT too. I think both of those guys are on kind of the same tier that Sewell is. I think Sewell's the best of the 3, but it's not by a big margin. That's a pretty consensus opinion that you'll seem to find. With this class, I'm not so high on so I love Christian Darrisaw personally, right? That's my OT2 top 5 player, someone who I view not that far off from Sewell versus the consensus opinion that Rashawn Slater's right there with him. I like all 3 of them. I also like Sam Cosmi. Those are, the 4 guys that are going to get a first round pick or first round grade from me. The only difference is Sam Cosmi and Rashawn Slater are going to be in the top 20 and top 25 respectively versus Wills and Wirfs, who were both top 5 players for me last year. Sewell and Darrisaw are both top 5 players for me this year as well. But then Andrew Thomas and Mekhi Becton were both top 10 and top 15 respectively. You don't get that same kind of talent right underneath the top guys for me. But like you said, the depth at OT, I completely agree, right? We saw not a ton of talent. I mean, we saw guys like Austin Jackson going 18th or wherever he went to Miami, right? So that was kind of where we were like, okay, so we're getting into some weird stuff. And then we saw Josh Jones and Lucas Niang, who I thought were the two best day 2 tackles last year anyways, really slide into that third round. I think here in the second round, you're going to have a number of guys like Dylan Radins is going to come off pretty early, who people are really going to like. Liam Eichenberg, Alex Leatherwood, right? A ton of these guys who are maybe not going to be these superstar tackles, but you feel comfortable that your team could draft them on that day 2 spot and be a potential starter as a rookie and past that. So I do think that you're going to get into, like you said, 13 guys. I would say 13 is going to be like the best case scenario for tackles. I would imagine it's going to be in that probably 10 number, from anywhere from 8 to 12. Right around 10 is where I'd imagine, just because it's so hard to predict what that would be like every 4 or 5 picks is an offensive tackle or something crazy, right? So the talent, the depth is there, but I do think that a couple of these really talented guys are going to slide into that day 3 spot as well. But I mean, overall, the talent at the tackle position is phenomenal. I mean, back-to-back years, we're really getting an influx of young guys into the league that I think are really high-level players.
Yeah, definitely. And I think some of those guys might even be treated kind of as guards as well.
Yeah.
So some of them, some teams could see them as, I mean, yeah, that's going to be a huge topic. We'll talk about that a lot more, but Donovan, kind of what's your overview of the class as well? Do you kind of agree with us? It's a little deeper than last year, but maybe not as top heavy.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think the top heavy, kind of like what Matt's like, the elite of the elite. Matt's pretty well with the elite of the elite we have now. I do see that gap that you're talking about, Matt. I think the depth there, like you guys said, is pretty noticeable difference from last year. I think the difference is those guys that, could go rounds 1 through 3. There's not really a huge knock on any of those guys that could keep them, barring, off field issues, injuries, bad coaching, that could keep them from being one day, whether it's immediately or, after a couple of seasons, a good plug and player at, a spot along the O-line. So I think that's where the depth kind of stands out. That you have a lot of guys that maybe not day 1, maybe not even season 1, but they can come in and play at a pretty high level, kind of, consistently as maybe some of the later round 1 guys, but still those, early round 3 guys can eventually, with the right coaching and right development, be that in kind of that same category in the same class.
Yeah. So now we're going to kind of dive into each prospect. I've kind of come up with a few questions that I'm kind of interested to hear Donovan and Matt and Rod's opinions on. But I'm going to segue here and talk to Donovan, because I think this is a question that's perfect for you, being a small school guy that played in college and has a lot of experience here. For smaller school tackles specifically, what's the most difficult aspect of transitioning their game to the NFL? Because it is a huge jump. You're talking about level of competition and experience, and then going to NFL athletes that you're playing against every single Sunday on every single snap. So what do you think there?
Yeah, I think a lot of people will point to kind of the strength and power that differs in Power 5 versus small schools. And that's something to me is a little overrated, because, you always have the freaks like Saquon Barkley, right? Or I think it was a tackle the other day who was hang clean and 450 pounds, right? Which is, absurd. But what you see a lot across the board, even with small school guys, is that O linemen and D linemen are pretty evenly strong across the board, no matter what Division I school you go to. Again, there's more freaks in the Power 5 that are, they can bench 500, they can squat 700, right? They can clean 400. But I think the biggest thing that small school guys have to, be at least good at, right? If not, they're going to struggle, is their technique. Because technique is something for an O-lineman that translates across the board in the NFL, right? Whether that's with your pass pro, whether that's your hand fundamentals, your leverage, that translates to the NFL, right? And it translates against guys that may be a little stronger than you, or way stronger, or way faster, right? And so that's the thing with small school guys, why I think we don't see them succeed as well, because the coaching sometimes isn't on par as at a Power 5, or they just haven't developed that way with their technique, because they were always big guys that were good athletes that could dominate in a smaller school conference.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing with small school guys. Like you said, sometimes they just need a little bit more time, but you saw several small school guys at the Senior Bowl just stand out in a huge way. You had Miners and Ray Dunce and Deontay Smith as well. Deontay Smith was pretty awesome at the Senior Bowl. He's probably one of my favorite players I got to watch. I wasn't there. I get to watch on TV, of course. But okay, so another question that, it's so prevalent every single year when you look at the draft. And Matt, I'm going to throw this one over to you. Every year we see during the draft, the question, like, is he a guard or is he a tackle? Some teams will see a player a certain way, and it's kind of hard to project that. But there's certain parameters and thresholds that can kind of give you a better idea of like what they will project to in the next level. So for you, like what differentiates a tackle from a guard?
So I think for me, honestly, it's my big thing. First and foremost, it's where they're comfortable playing, right? If a player just feels better at tackle and they think that they are performing better at tackle and their skill set and their mindset is that they are a tackle, then to me, it just doesn't make sense to move them to guard, right? Now, as far as some like physical characteristics, arm length is going to be one that gets a lot. I use the 33-inch threshold. I do know some teams that use 34, right? So if you have a 34-inch threshold, that means you're talking about guys like Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell, right, are not tackles in your books, which just doesn't make sense to me. I think the 33-inch is fine. I think the separation between an inch really doesn't, despite what your girlfriends might tell you, does not make a difference. But really, it's just kind of insane to me that people want to focus so heavily on things like that. For me, as opposed to power or as opposed to arm length, power at the point of attack, right? If you consistently move people off of the ball, you're going to translate a little bit better inside. Just theoretically, right? That's the big thing. Your anchors, you have to be able to show these things. That's why with the Rashawn Slater guard, the guard talk, I don't really understand because he's so smooth, he's so fluid, he's such a good athlete, he gets to his spots so well that it doesn't matter. How you play in space is what's important for a tackle, right? How you move from one spot to the other. Can you meet a defensive end before he gets past you on your break, right? So I just wonder when we got so infatuated with arm length that it became the end all be all for an offensive tackle. So, I mean, as far as when I look at guys in this class that I think are probably guards that are widely considered tackle, a guy like Teven Jenkins that we've talked about, Nate, a guy with shorter arms, at times has shown an anchor that can get compromised pretty easily. Ronnie Perkins sent him into another dimension with a long arm. There's things like that are where I'm like, okay, maybe on the interior we are, or maybe on the outside we are going to have, because if you're letting defensive ends get into your chest so often, you're losing the reps instantly if you don't have that play strength to be able to stand there. So sometimes I just wonder with the arm length, yes, it's the important, right, to have that 33, that 34 to meet that threshold, but we really don't need anything past that. Yes, it's a boost. Yes, it, everything like that, but there are a number of successful guards in the NFL with 34-inch arms. And
yeah, absolutely.
So that's where there's no specific, this guy has to be a guard. It's just where they're comfortable playing and where I think, like AVT I have as a guard just because his best play, in my opinion, was at the guard position, right? I think he can be a tackle, and that's fine. And I have no issue with guards wanting to play tackles or tackles. My issue is when we start to get into the point where, oh, he's a good tackle, but he would be a really good guard. Yeah, because he's a good offensive lineman, right? You don't think Zach Martin could play tackle in the NFL? You don't think Quentin Nelson could play tackle successfully in the NFL? You don't think Trent Williams would be the best guard in football? That's where I'm like, what are we doing here? So with the guard conversation, that's why I get so heated about it on Twitter and stuff like that, is it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So I would say, like me as an analytics nerd, like the first thing I'll tell you is like thresholds. You need to have some sort of flexibility there. It can't be binary. It can't be absolute all or nothing, because I think sometimes that's how you miss out on some really great prospects. And if it's not showing up on tape or with their production, if it's not an issue in college and they're playing against top level competition, then I don't see why it's going to be an issue, transitioning to the NFL. So I'm with you there, but I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and I will say probably half of the guys we're about to talk about, there are some people who think they could play guard, honestly, like, especially once you get into round two.
And to be honest, I think almost any tackle in this class could play guard if they wanted to, right? So the question isn't which tackles should be guards or which tackles can be guards. It's what tackles need to be guards, right? That's what I go into at first. That's how I'm looking at the debate every time.
Yeah, I mean, the underlying like topic that keeps coming up is versatility, right? Mm-hmm. At the Senior Bowl, all of the NFL teams asked the Senior Bowl, hey, I want to see these tackles play guard. I want to see some of these guards play tackle, because they want that versatility where if they struggle at one position, at least we know we can play you at guard, or we can move you to the inside if it's not going to work out. So I think that's huge. So now we're going to start talking about players specifically, because we kind of hit on some broad ranging topics that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to throw it to Rod. Rod, I know you're not the offensive line guru like Matt and Donovan over here, but I know you've been studying up a little bit. Do you think there's any chance that Rashawn Slater falls to 19? Like, are we talking about like no chance in hell, or is there any chance that he could fall?
There's a good chance. I mean, it's a strong class offensively, defensively. So what can happen is we've had our conversation on quarterbacks. We talk linebackers. There's some rising. So there's an opportunity there, but just based on how others picks fall, where he is there at 19 for us to get. But do I think we grab him at 19? That's the other conversation that I would have where I differ a little bit. Again, for me, Brandon Scherf's leaving. We don't know franchise tag. Can he replace him as an inside guard? I don't think he's a tackle, in my opinion. I'm kind of on that binary conversation. So I would be more the old guard versus size matter versus offensive tackle and offensive guards. So I would say put him inside. So you really to me, is he a guard at 19 that you would take? No, but I think is a possibility to be there very strongly. Possibility to be at 19. But I would honestly pass.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's, at least from what I've read, like you're looking at like less than a 5% chance. It seems like almost everyone has him. Maybe some teams do have him as a guard, but it seems like almost everyone has him as offensive tackle 2 or 3, maybe. I mean, there's so much to like about him, like, to be honest. But so it's Slater, like Donovan. What do you think his like main strengths are? Because for me, like footwork stands out, right? Like footwork, that's the first thing I think about, and then the second thing I think about that everyone like will not shut up about. Like it kind of gets annoying. They just start talking about him against Chase Young. Like that's all. And after a while, it just gets kind of arduous. Like we talk about the same thing. Like, can you talk about anything else other than Chase Young? But I mean, what's something you like about Rashawn Slater that maybe stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, after all the Chase Young talk, it worried me for a little bit because that's all people were harping on. It's like you're only focusing on this because there's nothing else. But then you dive into the film. He's really consistent, right? He's consistent across the board with his footwork, like you mentioned, with his style of play, with his pad leverage, his hands. I mean, he really is just a smooth player. Matt, I think you mentioned that, and he's a guy that, I mean, like not a lot of people will describe, an O lineman as playing sexy, right? But like he plays smooth and sexy, like an O lineman. That's what stands out to me about him. I think it's his biggest strength. It's going to translate well.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I know Matt wants to talk about Slater, but instead I'm going to keep the train going and we're going to move to his favorite offensive tackle. Someone who like everyone, all Washington fans just adore. And I mean, I'm on the train. I love him. But so Christian Darrisaw, he's the consensus fan favorite. If he could somehow fall to pick 19, I don't see it happening. But if he does, like I think you run up to the podium with that pick. But my question for you, Matt, and I think you maybe answered this already, but you can just touch on it again, is like, how does Christian Darrisaw compare to the tackles in the 2020 draft? And then where does he need to improve on? Because one knock that I see that I don't think is a huge deal, but something that I have seen not consistently, but in a few games is it seems like sometimes he's either winded or he takes plays off. Like it's almost like he plays down to some of his competition. Like it's too easy and he doesn't like finish all the time. Like, and I'm talking about like maybe like 10% of the time. It's nothing. It's not a huge deal, but you know what I'm talking about. You've seen like the Liberty game or something like that,
And on the inverse, I'll mention that his best film that I watched was against Miami, right? Miami, who has the best edge rushers in the NFL 2021 NFL draft class, right? So I do think that there's probably a little bit of that. Now, luckily in the NFL, there's not a ton of playing down to your competition because you're playing against the best players in the world. But I definitely think it's possible, right? You go into a game and you're like, okay, I play for Virginia Tech. We're playing Liberty. I'm not exactly like stressing about whoever this future, whoever they're lining up against, right? Now, shout out Malik Willis because he is fun, and we'll be talking about him in 2022.
Yes.
But I mean, with Darrisaw, I think he's definitely the most raw of any top prospect between last year and this year, between Sewell, Slater, Wirfs, Wills. Becton, you can kind of put the toss up. Because I do think Darrisaw's down-to-down consistency is better and just his overall hand usage, but Becton was definitely more of just a freak of his existence, right? Just being what he is. So I understand, when Joe Douglas decided to make that pick. I think he's closer to Wirfs Wills than he is Sewell because I do think he's more toolsy than Sewell is. He's got a better frame. He's a little bit more athletic. I comped him to Trent Williams. Now he's not that 1% Trent athlete that Trent was and still is, right? So he's not what Tristan Wirfs kind of was as a prospect, and that's why I held Tristan Wirfs in such a high regard. But with Darrisaw, I mean, the hand usage, the aggression, I do think that he can work on finishing blocks more consistently, but Tristan Wirfs was the same way coming out of college. He just wasn't. Some guys really just don't have that, like, I'm going to be nasty every single play, right? Some people just don't play with that. Brandon Scherf, is the extreme spectrum where every single play he's trying to humiliate someone. Other guys are just, you know what, I'm gonna get in my guy's way. I'm gonna block him, right? My job is to not let him make the play, but I don't have to embarrass him on a down-to-down basis. Now Darrisaw can get a guy on the ground, right? He has that functional play strength, so I'm not too worried about it. Like I said, a successful play doesn't have to result in a pancake. Nate, I don't know if you said something funny, but you were muted, and I was kind of hoping to.
Sorry, yeah, I was gonna say, ask Chad Surratt about that.
Exactly. And so with Darrisaw, like you said, I mean, he's gone against NFL competition and done well enough for him that I'm not tripping over a bad game, and not even a bad game, but just a underwhelming game against a team like Liberty. So I don't have a ton of issues when I went into Darrisaw's film like I thought I was. I thought he was going to be a raw prospect. So when I was able to put together what he already has developed into him and the skills, the traits that he has that you can't teach, I already think that he's got. I mean, I think he's a better prospect than Slater is personally, right? And when you talk about a guy like Cosmi, who's got the tools, all the tools you want, he's far more developed than Cosmi. So he might not be as developed as Slater, but his frame is far more palatable, I guess, to play tackle in the NFL. Whereas, Cosmi's got that frame and got those tools, but Darso's such a substantially better player on a down-to-down basis. And so that's when those two worlds kind of meet, because I do think Cosmi and Slater are kind of the exact extremes, where Slater's so smooth, like we talked about, so consistent. He's so well developed. He's the only tackle I watched in the 2021 class that would use 3 different pass sets. Some of them will walk out with 2. And remember, and Thorne talked about this. He'll go 45. He'll go at a 90, or he'll go straight up in jump set, which is so uncommon to watch from an offensive tackle. And so with Slater, you got that super developed. Cosmi, you've got that super raw. The hands are kind of there. You see that, but he's all tools. He's that top 1% athlete. Darrisaw's kind of in the middle, and that's just why I'm so high on him. And I do think that if we're talking about one of them, Slater versus Darrisaw, Darrisaw's much more likely to make it to 19, in my opinion. Talking to some people, I guess, like half the NFL likes Slater over Sewell. So it's not even 100% guarantee that Sewell would be the first tackle taken in the 21 class.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that crazy? I just can't imagine the thing with Sewell. And I know I promised I wouldn't talk about him too much because we have no chance of drafting him. It's like this dude, and you can roll your eyes at breakout age, Matt, because like that's stupid. We won't talk. Listen.
I'm down for breakout age when it's boosting someone up. I'm just saying that Devontae Smith is not a bad prospect for being 22 years old. I'm sorry. Breakout age cannot tell me that.
But I'll apply the concepts of breakout age. And what I mean by that is like Sewell is doing what he did at the youngest age possible, dominating people.
He never played a game of college outside of his teens. That is insane.
Right. Like he's just a younger player beating up on older players. And I think that translates to the next level, but I don't even think like Slater to me, like, I don't know how big his ceiling is compared to guys like Darrisaw or Sewell, because it comes back to athleticism and your age and stuff like that. But we could talk about Darrisaw all day, but I'm going to transition to a guy who's going, I feel like he's a little underrated because he's not very sexy, but he's kind of grown on me, to be honest, because he does everything right. He's just not really the most flashy guy, and that's Liam Eichenberg. And I'm going to throw it back to Rod on this one. Rod, do you think Liam Eichenberg is kind of underrated or overlooked because maybe just because like he went to Notre Dame and he's kind of boring compared to a few of these other guys? But what do you think there?
No, I think you hit it on the head. That's exactly what it is. He's a technician, all right. And at that position, when you get things done, you get overlooked. But I think he's a solid, dependable, consistent prospect, right? Do I think he's a day one guy? Don't think he's a day one guy. That's another conversation in the class where you have the teams we've been talking about, the Darrisaw, the Sewell, the Slater, even the Jenkins to some part, right? He gets overlooked. And like we said, when we started the show, in this very, very top heavy draft class. But I think if you can get him on a day 2, you're getting a solid prospect that can come in and be an immediate starter. And then maybe year 3, year 4, you're looking at maybe at a Pro Bowl caliber player. But I think that's the issue. And I don't think he's overhyped. I just think he's underlooked. And that's the program. Notre Dame is you don't get you're not raving about a lot of prospects out of Notre Dame. It's just not going to happen at any lineman position. So that's just what it is.
Yeah, I can tell you living in Kansas City that pretty much all the fans here have Eichenberg just penciled in to go here. and he kind of just seems like a Chief or like a Steeler, in a lot of ways. But I don't want to spend too much time on him because we kind of I feel like we hit the nail on the head with that one. But let's go on to a guy who I know Matt has an interesting opinion on, and I know there's a few other people who are crazy high on him, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle, I guess. But I'm talking about Oklahoma State tackle or guard, depends how you feel. Teven Jenkins. So Donovan, we're going to talk a little bit about Teven Jenkins here. Like I said, he's getting a lot of buzz, and with good reason. He hasn't allowed a sack in the past 2 seasons, and you can roll your eyes at that because, like, we all know there's a lot more that goes into sacks than just, getting a sack. Okay. But we can talk about that another time. But my question to you is, like, is the hype warranted? And on top of that, can he succeed as a left tackle in the league, given his older age? He's 23. So that is kind of a little bit up there. You could argue like maybe like he's starting to peak physically. And then on top of that, like his arm length, which Matt talked about a little bit before, and then his lack of experience against top tier edge rushers, right? The Big 12. I mean, I went to Kansas. I love the Big 12, but let's be honest. They don't have a lot of them. They have guys like Osai, who's like really raw. There's not a lot of them anyway. So that was a really long. Yeah, it's a long-winded question, exactly. I guess, Donovan. But what do you think about Jenkins? Do you think he can survive at left tackle? Yada yada. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I vouched for him last weekend to you, yes. Mr. Snyder, and so I'm a fan. I don't know if he's being overhyped, but I've seen a lot of talk about him, creeping up, past like where AVT would be, or past some of the other tackles. And so I think he's an absolute mauler in the run game, right? I think that at tackle or guard, right? I think like Matt, and I think you have the opinion too. He could step in and be a pretty damn good guard.
Yeah.
I think as a tackle, he would be just as good in the run game and would open up so many holes for any NFL team as that mauler run blocker. There are some concerns in pass pro, right? He just doesn't have that crazy or even, a high level athletic ability on the edge, right? And you see him get caught sometimes with his hands or with his short sets, right? A little knee over the foot sometimes. And so, he's a guy that I think could come in at left tackle and play, but you're going to have a lot more growing pains, especially if someone you take in the first round. And I don't know if, coaches have the patience for that. I think he's a guy that with a lot of development, not a lot of development, but with some good development and good coaching, he could be a good left tackle. I just don't know how many teams are willing to be that patient at first round. I do like him in the first round at both positions. At guard, I think he would be a high caliber guard, especially for Washington.
Yeah, so I'm kind of in between you guys, right? I see him. I don't see him as like necessarily a left tackle of the future. I guess I see him as a right tackle, but I don't see him as a guard. So I'm like right in between. But Matt, I know we were talking about this before. You're a little lower on Jenkins, so I'd love to get your quick take on why you're lower than consensus.
When I got around to Jenkins, I was just on him, right? Like I wasn't super high on him. I didn't love the film, but I wasn't low on him. It was just when people started to like really, really get around to him. And then I don't want to say groupthink, but the consensus opinion on Teven Jenkins started to get a lot higher than what it was when I had initially watched him, right? And so obviously nothing changes for me because I didn't see after that happens. I didn't go back and watch the tape because my opinion was going to change. It wasn't right. I watched my 8 games of him. I know what I think of Teven Jenkins. I think he could be a phenomenal. Like I think he's more likely to be a guard in the NFL than a tackle because I don't see him failing as a guard, but I definitely see a reality where it doesn't work out for him as a tackle in the NFL, and that's okay, right? That's not me saying he's a bad player. That's just me saying that maybe his skill set isn't perfectly suited. That's why I just don't think, as far as left tackle goes, right, I don't think the team should be considering him at left tackle at all for all the things we've talked about. The age, he does have some experience at left tackle, but for the past 2 years, it's been all right tackle. The arm length, the lack of, there's nothing that I see where I'm like, if I see a guy who's got dominant traits in the draft, dominant athletic traits, who's a 4-year tackle at a random FCS school or a random D2 or D3 school, right? To me, it's like, okay, well, we can draft him and develop those tools. That makes sense to me. To someone who's already developed, but doesn't have the tools to be, one of these great guys who isn't this ball of clay that you can mold, and he's already kind of the player that he's going to be. That's where I don't see the transition to the left tackle, that he can just be a left tackle. Now I could be wrong, right? Jedrick Wills played right guard, right tackle at Alabama and was a phenomenal left tackle for Cleveland, was a top 10 left tackle as a rookie last year. Unfortunately for him, Tristan Wirfs decided to be the best right tackle in the NFL as a rookie, so it kind of overshadowed him. But so it's not impossible. It's just, to me, there's no reason to believe that Jenkins can and would be successful if they drafted him in 19 and put him in a tackle. I could see him being a successful right tackle in the NFL, right? That reality is there. And that's why I'm not, oh, this is a day 3 guy, I don't want to draft him. That's why it's, okay, well, I have a round 3 grade on him because I do think he has that tackle ability. He has that ability to be high level guard. Same thing with AVT, right? I recognize the ability to do it. It just makes more sense to me to move him inside. Now, obviously, as someone who's so anti moving tackles to guard, it is a little weird to say that, but my thing has always been elite tackles are elite tackles, and they should be given the chance to play tackle, right? They shouldn't just be profiled as a guard. So if I'm drafting Teven Jenkins and he's like, yo, I'm going to be a successful right tackle in the NFL, I'm going to be a successful tackle in the NFL, then okay, let's play you at tackle. Washington, I think if they did take Jenkins, he's probably playing guard anyways because they have those set tackles. Now, maybe if Morgan Moses gets hurt, you play him there. But being Washington specific, I think he could play any of those 4 spots on the line, any guard or tackle spot.
Yeah, I listened to Greg Cosell recently, and he said something that's like, it sounds so simple, but it's so true. Like, there are 64 offensive tackles in the NFL. Not each and every one of them is going to be like good, like some of them are going to be, they're not going to be good at everything, especially you have right tackles too. But I totally agree with everything you say. And you made some really fair points, to be honest. So I'm going to make this question really quick. I want a 1-word answer from each of you guys. Starting with Rod. Rod, do you see Jalen Mayfield as a 1st-round pick?
No.
What about you, Donovan?
Nope.
Matt?
No.
Okay. Yeah, me neither. I don't understand why he's getting mocked at the end of the 1st. When I think about some of the other talent, like Cosmi, like I feel like he's better than him. I don't understand why he keeps, why does Cosmi get mocked behind him? I don't really get that. But we're going to talk about him next because I've heard you guys all talk about him. And so my question with Samuel Cosmi is he's battle tested, right? He has over 1,000 career snaps. And that's at both tackle positions, not just left tackle. He's played 1,000 snaps at right tackle and left tackle, which I found really interesting. And we all know he's a freak athlete, right? 9.9, 99th percentile spark free, right? I mean, he's just, he crushed it at his pro day. But I feel like he's falling under the radar a little bit. And I think this is due to a few holes that I feel like with holes, people nitpick things and they overemphasize it, right? Like I feel like a lot of those things are correctable a lot of times, but some of the perceived issues I've heard is he's a waist bender, he's late out of his stance, and sometimes he plays high. And I'm not saying that he does this 100% of the time. I'm just saying sometimes. So I'll throw this to Matt because this is one of your favorite guys. Like, which of those?
But with Cosmi, probably I would imagine the hip stuff is going to be able to be fixed in that first rookie training camp. It's that pad level and the other stuff, that developing him into an all-pro tackle, which is what you're hoping for with that physical stuff. It's that getting the feet consistent, getting that down to down consistency. That's going to be the hardest stuff. Great.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm going to throw this over to Rod here. So Rod, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but Rashawn Slater, the first thing you hear with him every time is he gets a ton of credit for his reps against Chase Young. And by the way, like he had some other reps against other like pro ready, like NFL players that we don't really talk about, but I mean, he held his own against all of them. But anyway, so he gets a lot of credit for that, but I feel like Alijah Vera-Tucker, he gets crushed a lot for his struggles against future first rounder Kayvon Thibodeau, if I said that name.
Yeah, and honestly, future potentially first overall pick Kayvon Thibodeau.
Top 10 at the minimum, right? He's probably a top 5 guy.
Elite prospect. Yeah.
Right.
He'll be in the conversation for the top player during summertime.
Yeah. Now a lot of fans like don't know who that is. So they're kind of just like, okay, whatever. But anyway, so the question kind of stems back to like, is he a legit tackle? And do you think he'll struggle at the next level matching up with other NFL talent? Cause like we talked about before, like you're going to be going up against NFL talent every damn day and every game day for sure. So what do you think there?
No, so I'm gonna stick to my original stance with Slater. I think he's a guard at the next level. I don't think he's a true tackle. I think if you leave him out there, I think he'll struggle against elite level defensive ends, especially in the NFC East, right? The market, he's gonna struggle in practice. It might make him better for it, but he's gonna deal with a lot in the NFC East. I think he's gonna struggle early, like most rookies do, depending on what side you put him at. I think it's better to protect him. You throw him inside, and I think again, that's why I wouldn't make that move at 19 for guard. But again, that's my opinion watching Slater. I think he belongs inside, not outside.
Okay.
Initially.
Yeah, I could see that. So Donovan with Alijah Vera-Tucker, because I know a lot of, I would say like half the analysts I read say he's going to be a guard, and the other half love him at tackle, even though he's undersized, has shorter arms, yada yada. Do you see him as a legit tackle, and do you think he's going to struggle at the next level with NFL talent?
I don't see him as a first round tackle. That's
Okay.
not that he couldn't, and I don't think he would struggle that much. I think him playing tackle for the season and doing, fairly well, other than against, an elite edge rusher, tells you more about him, about his future as a pro, on his mentality and who he is as a person, right? Willing to put on the line for his team and play a position that, he isn't as elite at compared to his guard. So I think that tells you more about what kind of man and player he is. But again, I wouldn't pick him as a tackle. I'd pick him as a guard. I think he'd be a damn good guard.
Okay, fair enough. I'm with you there. Okay, Matt, we're going to go over to favorite day 2 target. So is there someone you really like on day 2? And I'd probably say specifically like around pick 51, right? Is there
so we're talking for
range?
Washington?
Yeah.
I think
someone you like.
Gotcha. Ideally, for me, it's Dylan Radins. As like that best case scenario for Washington, because I think they're both Radins with his great athletic ability, played at NDSU, right? Maybe you don't want him to play day 1. That's kind of where Washington fits in. Let Cornelius Lucas do his thing, because I think Cornelius Lucas was good enough last year that he deserves to be given the opportunity to be the starting left tackle, at least for this upcoming year, or to play out his contract in Washington. With Radins as a guy underneath, kind of the same idea why they drafted Jerron Christian, just maybe with a little bit better results, although Christian had good play at times last year. Another guy, you can talk about if you want to go for a right tackle replacement with, Morgan Moses' future past maybe next year kind of in question. You could talk about a guy like Jalen Mayfield if he makes this, a guy like Spencer Brown, some people really, really like. I think guys like Jackson Carman are probably going to end up being a guard at the next level anyways. I think that's how the NFL views him. I don't think Alex Leatherwood will be there either. So if you're talking about 51, I think the best case scenario for both value and just player fit is probably going to be Dylan Radins.
Okay, I like that answer. Hey, everyone's rumoring us to be going after Trey Lance, so we could be potentially have his blindside protector.
Well, if we go get Trey Lance, I don't know if we'll be at pick 51.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a dream scenario. I think people are. We don't want to get into that, but I think people are like overly dismissive of trading up, like it's impossible.
Oh no, and people and fans of the teams that would be moving down are overly dismissive about trading down.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, I go figure. In my most recent mock at Pro Football Network had Washington trading up to Detroit, and Detroit fans did not get enough value for their liking, and Washington paid way too much for Washington fans' likings. So it's just a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. So yeah, I checked out that write-up, by the way. It was great. So definitely check out Matt's work over at Pro Football Network. I really like that one. So we talked a little bit about Spencer Brown, so I'm not going to bring him up. I'm going to move on to Donovan. We're going to talk a little bit about Deontay Smith. And this is kind of in your wheelhouse, because he's a guy, he comes from Eastern Carolina. Some people are like, what is that?
Pirates.
Yeah, exactly. But he was a guy who no one was talking about him, but I remember I read up on him not to pat myself on the back. I don't know anything, but like I read up on him a bunch because I'd never heard about him, to be honest. I really didn't know who he was. And I wanted to read about him before the Senior Bowl. And man, he stood out at the Senior Bowl so much. He crushed it at the Senior Bowl. He graded out as like the highest player there for Pro Football Focus on the one-on-ones. And obviously that's a tiny sample. And I will say, like, you weren't going against the cream of the crop when it came to edge rushers, but he did a lot of his damage on the one-on-ones, like playing at guard, which he really hasn't played guard that much, which I found really interesting. But he's a guy that I'm interested in maybe like round 3, something like that. But Deontay Smith, Eastern Carolina, he's still seen as a major project, right? Which I can totally understand. But what are some areas of concern with Deontay Smith's game, I guess, and how can he fix them? So something you don't like, and how he can fix it at the next level.
Yeah. So I think one thing he does, and you see this a lot with young or, not as confident linemen, not to say that he's not, thinking, sitting there like I'm not confident, but sometimes subconsciously get it, is, moving around a lot in the middle of play, right? Which is why a lot of times those tackles get beat inside. It's with an offensive tackle and guard, it's settling your feet, right? It's not stopping your feet mid-play, but a lot of times when you see analysts and people on Twitter, when you see Trent Williams or, Tyron Smith, and you hear the phrase like, the tackle just looks like he's bored, right? Where they're just kind of like, it doesn't look like they're moving, but you watch them and as a football guy, like, they're doing something, right? And it's just settling his feet. And so I think that's the big thing with him is that if he calms down, settles his feet in pass pro, he's going to stop a lot of those, egregious beat inside, right? Or struggle mid play, right? Or get beat on the edge. I think that's his biggest thing to work on. And that could pump him up into the starting lineup one day in the NFL. But that's a big task. It's not an easy one. It's not the same as getting stronger, right? Or work on your flexibility. It's not easy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you there. He's someone I am interested in, but like I said, later on. Rod, let's turn it back over to you. So besides Penei Sewell, because we're not going to get him, right? But who are some other guys that are your favorite like finishers in the class? And but what I mean by finisher is someone like he plays probably past the whistle a lot of times, but he finishes people. Like you feel his presence after the whistle a lot of times.
No, so I like Darrisaw there. I think he's great. He's the one that stands out to me. I'm not mad at Mayfield. I think Mayfield is he's a Hawk candidate, but I wouldn't go first round for him. Right? You put him on the right side, he could be a finisher as well. And a guy a day 3 prospect for me in the 5th round that I would like to go get as a developmental tackle is maybe Stone Forsythe out of Florida. I think he's another guy that's a finisher. Some issues about his size, but then I'll say a 6'9" left tackles. A friend of mine, Alijah Vera-Tucker, from Pittsburgh last year. We saw he did at 6'9", 320. Was a Pro Bowler 2 years again. So size, like as Matt said earlier, right? Size is very opinionated. It's what's your flavor of the month. So those are 3 guys to me that I would look at as finishers that play through the whistle, like are Hawk candidates, as I call them.
I like that. I like that a lot. Villanueva, by the way, I think he's still a free agent. I don't understand. Why aren't the Chiefs calling up? That's who needs to go after him. Maybe they don't have
money.
They don't have any money. No, they don't. They have no money. Yeah. They talk about it every day on the radio.
Does he
we have no money.
Free, right? Does he want to come play for free? Maybe.
Yeah. They're going to have Kyle Long playing tackle before too long or something. Or maybe Niang will work out.
Yeah,
that's who I want to see.
Right tackle, right. That's going to be big for the brand. That's going to be huge for the brand. People are going to be like, oh, who's Lucas Niang? Oh, let me tell you. Let me tell you a little something.
So good segue there. Niang's kind of a little bit of a project. Matt, how do you feel about James Hudson out of Cincinnati? He's a guy who played defensive line. I think wasn't he recruited by Michigan or transferred from Michigan?
So to my knowledge, this is just off the top of my head. He was recruited by Michigan as a defensive tackle, I believe. Played there. Well, didn't really play there, which is why he transferred, went to Cincinnati. They moved him to tackle. And he just does that now. And I mean, when everything's clicking, it's really, really good tape. It's first round tape for sure, 100%. When it's not clicking, which is probably like 65% of the time, it's not first round tape. So it's really hard to evaluate where you want that player. He's another guy that I think it would make sense. Now, 51, we're still kind of high for him, in my opinion. I do think he could go that high. I definitely think top 50 is potential. You talk about like, who's going to be the random dude who gets drafted in the first round? He's definitely one of those people to watch out for, because we know how much the NFL just loves to overdraft athletic profiles in the first round for tackles. Now, sometimes it works, right? Colton Miller is a really good player for Oakland or for Las Vegas now, which is kind of wild to me because his tape at UCLA was not good. I was not a fan, but I missed that eval because he's been very, very good for them. And I'm very happy for him. But then you get a guy like, I don't know, the Falcons drafting Caleb McGarry or Houston drafting Titus Howard in the first round, right? So that's when it's like, that's not a great pick either. So it's with James Hudson, that's where I think teams got to be careful. Now, Washington's taking James Hudson at 74 because they think they can iron out some of the stuff and he could be a starting left tackle. I'm all for that. And it's the same thing with like the quarterback idea of drafting a potential quarterback in the 3rd round. The hit rate's going to be pretty low, right? And it's the same idea we did it with Jerron Christian. We drafted a toolsy tackle in the hopes that maybe he could be the future left tackle of the team. Doesn't look like it's going to end up that way. But could you imagine how great we would be feeling if Jerron Christian was our starting left tackle and was a very competent football player and developed all those tools? So that's kind of where it is. When you get into that 3rd round, I don't care that you're drafting players that are going to be starters or going to be consistent football players. But if you're getting a guy who has the ability to be a high quality starter, if things go the right way, I'm okay. That risk makes sense to me. So a guy like James Hudson makes a lot of sense in that round 3 if he falls that far, because those tools are so good, and you see the flashes on tape that think, oh, you could have been a top 20 prospect if he consistently showed this. You bring him into the system and you just hope to be able to put him in a position to consistently do that. So I like James Hudson. I just don't know that I'm going to like James Hudson where he gets drafted. But if he does see a little bit of draft day slide, I'm definitely all over it for Washington on late day 2.
Yeah, I mean, he has a crazy ceiling. The question is kind of what is his floor?
Yeah.
You know, like when can you project him to play? So,
and he's a weird, and he's just such a weird eval, right? How many times are you going to? How many offensive tackles are you taking top 100 that have only played offensive tackle for 2 years? It's not a huge list, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, sometimes when you watch him play, like sometimes he just looked lost out there.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't know. He's not playing offensive tackle. He's out there. He's playing defensive tackle.
Yeah, he's like, should I turn around and just sack the quarterback?
And that's the thing. That's an experience thing. That's an instinct thing. Like it all just comes, right? Nobody's going to be. You can't just put somebody on a spot on the football field and expect them to know what to do, right? We've all seen people when they're first starting out playing football. With him, he's just starting out. You know, it's Cincinnati. It's still a group of 5. It's still the best group of 5 conference. It's still, he went to Michigan, right? So he's still a football player. It's just all of the nuance that goes into playing a position, especially at this level now, it's just a lot. And he doesn't have that yet. And that's okay. The idea is that you can give him that, and the tools that he already have make him that outside, that future potential left tackle is what I don't think Jenkins has, right? When we talked about that going back, is that he doesn't have that supreme physical profile that I can bank on and say, this is what's going to make him a good left tackle. James Hudson does have that. So that's where that's a nice little way to show you what I had meant earlier.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to skip a few of these other questions because I know we need to get into our make a case portion. But one guy I have to talk about because like I know he's a total projection and we really don't know where he's at, but someone that he fascinates me. Like I would be very interested in him on day 2, and I don't know where he's going to go, but it's Walker Little out of Stanford. So Walker, I did some research on him, and man, it's crazy. So the 2017 high school offensive tackle class, this class was insane, man. Like, let me tell you about it. So the guy, I wrote it all down here. So the guys in this class, 2017 high school class: Wirfs, Alijah Vera-Tucker, Andrew Thomas, Jedrick Wills, Austin Jackson, Leatherwood, and then of course, Walker Little, all in the same class. Out of all these guys,
Little was the top guy, right?
Yeah, I remember. He was ranked like number 3, number 2, but he had the highest athletic score. And on top of that, once they all started to play in college, in their first 2 seasons, Walker Little graded out as the best offensive tackle out of any of them. So that kind of shows you like what type of potential he has. And we know offensive linemen, their progression, their experience, the way they develop, it's linear. It goes up, right? Like slowly but surely as they get a little bit older, as they fill out their body. So Walker Little, to me, if you're projecting him and you ignore the injuries a little bit, he has day 1 talent, but he's probably going to go in day 2. So that's a guy I really like. I know, like, I didn't really ask a question there. I really like Walker Little. I guess like a really quick answer, because I know we need to get to make a case, but like, Rod, are you interested in Walker Little?
I'll be lying if I say much about him because he hasn't played in like 2 years, right? You ain't seen him in a while. You get him day 2, he's going to be developmental. Maybe he plays swing tackle for the first 2 years, but I haven't seen much about him, to be knowledgeable, to be honest.
Yeah, and Donovan, like, I think he could go anywhere from round 2 to round 4, to be honest. Like, we really don't know. He's really hard to project. Do you like him? Are you interested, Donovan?
I don't know if I even like him with any of our, first round 1 through 3 picks. I mean, again, 1 game in 2 years is pretty concerning. He does have the talent, but again, I don't know if I'd touch him over some of the other guys, especially in a deep, round 1 through 3 class.
Okay. No, that's fair. I mean, you know me, like analytics guy, like I don't like small samples, and usually I don't like guys that are a projection. I stay away from them for the most part. But Matt, are you a Walker Little truther, or are you on the same boat?
So Walker Little's kind of in that same light as like Mitch Hyatt to me, where there was a lot of accolades and love for him in college. That was a little perplexing to me. I didn't love the film because he's been draft eligible for like 2 years now, or a year now. Going into last year, he was draft eligible, so I had to watch all his tape then. And then this year, literally like half a month ago, I had to watch all of it again. Didn't love the film. Like you said, the tools are there. I recognize that. So with the same ideas like James Hudson, I think that you could warrant a 3rd round pick. But I mean, I didn't see the shining moments as frequently with Little as I did with Hudson, which is saying a lot because we just talked about the ratio of Hudson's play, right? So with Little, I'm not super enamored. I do understand the appeal, but to be honest, I think he's going to be gone on pretty early day 2, just because of the NFL's historic love for highly regarded high school players.
Right. They love those 5 stars.
Exactly.
So great answers, guys. Some really good analysis there. Rod, I'm going to give it back to you. We're going to do our make a case now really quick.
Yeah, so just real quick, we continue off our last great conversation we had last week. We're going to step back into the war room. All right. So this is where we've given our 3 participants. I'll be the actual the GM this time, making the case. Nate will fill in and as a scout. And the 3 players this time, giving our information, right? So again, how we got this, we did 100 mock drafts and we ran the data and we did some correlation reports, right? So we'll never have a situation where we're drafting 2 offensive tackles of the line, because the likelihood of that happening just won't happen. So again, the great insight here, but as we know, Donovan, we picked with our first round with the 19th pick was Teven Jenkins was our first round pick. So with our 2nd round pick, Matt will be representing Kelvin Joseph. Donovan will be Asante Samuel Jr. and Nate will be the high flyer as of late the last few days, linebacker Jamin Davis. All right, gentlemen. So we've done our research. We've done our homework here. We'll put a little bit of information on the screen as far as our last few pick 2nd rounders, what was in the league and what pick 51 was for the last 5 years as well. All right. So without further ado, we will put 10 minutes on the clock, and I love alphabetical order. So Donovan, you will go first. Matt, you will go second. And Nate, you will round it up, and then we'll make a decision. Gentlemen, you do not have to take the entire 2 minutes that you have. If you don't think you need it, you take as much time as you want. All right? If we can get started, diving up first. Clock started.
Let's roll. We can get 2 in a row. So Asante Samuel Jr., right? He's a really consistent player, 3-year starter in the ACC. And he shows a lot of like high level, football intelligence and awareness. He's not a great athlete, but he's good enough, right? He's got like good closing speed, right? He plays with the wide receivers well in his speed. He plays with his hair on fire, though. I mean, he really does. He's only 5'10", I get it. But, I read somewhere that if he was 6'1", we'd be talking about him as a 1st round pick, right? And I could see that. I kind of agree with that. He's shown that he can play against wide receivers of any type. He locked down Dimey Brown against UNC, right? He doesn't shy away, outside of the passing, he doesn't shy away from coming downhill and making a tackle in the run game, right? So he's a guy that I think is not necessarily being overlooked, but kind of shrugged off a little bit because of his height and his size. But his fit with Washington, I think, is better than most people think. I think first and foremost, he could probably come in and start at nickel cornerback, right? I think there would be a competition between him and Moreland, right? And if Moreland beats him out, right, is it nickel corner? Because I don't think that Moreland is the guy that would just be locked in, right? Asante Samuel come in and there wouldn't be some kind of competition. I think even if Moreland beats him out, Asante Samuel is still going to be a guy that can play on the outside, right? He can play on the boundary. And that adds so much depth to the secondary, right? Which I don't think is in a bad spot. I don't think it's great, but I think having that depth, right, and a guy who is such a good man coverage corner, along with William Jackson III, with this D line now, it allows Jack Del Rio to have so much scheme versatility and so many different, ways to hide some of the other weakness, right? If you don't get the linebacker you want, you don't get the safety you want to fill in the other holes. I think Asante Samuel adds that. And so I think he just adds another piece to this defense, another chess piece that helps take it another step forward to being elite and to being a defense that can truly carry you into the Super Bowl, help you get the way with the competent offense, right? So that's my case for Asante Samuel Jr.
There it is. I like it. Matt, Kelvin Joseph.
Well, I mean, if we're going cornerback here, we're talking about the size and the athletic ability. Some concerns of Samuel, that those don't come with Kelvin Joseph. We're talking about a true apex alpha athlete. We're talking about 6'1", right around 200 pounds. I think he's, I think 191 was his listed. Probably plays at about 195. 4'3" guy, right? True 4'30" guy. Some off the field concerns, but I mean, you bring him into a defense where Jack Del Rio wants to run this cover one so frequently now. You brought in William Jackson to be that number 1 guy. Kelvin Joseph has more than the physical abilities to come in, be that, play opposite of William Jackson if you want to. And now you have the ability to play Kendall Fuller at either free safety, at nickel. You can bump him inside, run 4 cornerbacks with him, Moreland, Joseph, and Jackson. And with Joseph, you don't even need him to start because the secondary is so good already, especially at the cornerback spot. Like you said, like Donovan said, we have 3 guys who are capable starters in Fuller, Moreland, and Jackson now anyway. So Kelvin Joseph doesn't have to play right away. He doesn't, like, he has the ability to be a true shutdown number 1 cornerback. That's a guy who we're talking about at 51, who, if the head was on straight, if he was playing consistently, if he was always healthy, you know, originally an LSU guy, now he's at Kentucky. I mean, this is a top 15 guy, and he's getting first round buzz for a reason. At 51, we have a chance to make the best value pick of the draft, right? If he hits his ceiling, this is the best pick on day 2. This is a guy who now we have the best, not just the best defense in the NFL, but now we have one of the best defenses in the past decade, past 20 years.
I stand a lot, man. That's a strong case. Strong case. Nate, Jamin Davis.
I'm talking directly to Mr. Snyder. Mr. Snyder, I want you to come out of your hot tub, walk over to your deck, out of your yacht, and I want you to look at your phone and look at the email I just sent you. I gave you film of my guy, middle linebacker, Jamin Davis. He is the high riser of the draft. He is getting so much helium, and he's getting helium with good reason, right? He's one of the only true Mike linebackers in this entire deep linebacker class. Most all the other linebacker prospects you've heard about didn't play Mike in college. They played Will, or they played Joker, or they played some other position, but this is a true apples to apples Mike linebacker. And you're talking about a freak athlete who scored in the 99th percentile for athleticism for a SPARQ score. On top of that, you're talking about a solid tackler with a huge tackle radius. He doesn't miss a lot of tackles because he's such a athletic freak, and his athleticism not only lets him, you know, have a huge catch radius, tackle radius, but he also can cover a lot of ground in the passing game. Now, he's still a work in progress there. You know, he's a little bit raw, but he did have 3 interceptions this season in the SEC. He's one of only 4 SEC defenders to have double-digit tackles for the year. So that's something to hang your hat on. But Jamin Davis is a first-round pick. He should be going at the end of the first round, and that's what all the NFL talking head draft analysts are saying right now. And at pick 51, you don't even have to think about it, Mr. Snyder. You need to just put down everything you're doing, call up Deron Rivera, make the call. Jamin Davis, pick 51. Thank you.
Hey, gentlemen, strong cases here, strong cases. And I'll tell you this, I'll be quite frank. I am from Tallahassee, Florida. So I've watched, I feel like, every Florida State game, and I'll go back to wherever. And Asante Samuels Jr. he's just not. It's a bad culture there. Let me just say that. Up until this last year, and they're starting to turn around. Some inconsistencies with his play, so he wouldn't be 51 for me. Now, between the 2 Kentucky brothers, that's where it becomes a conversation, and a very great one. You 2 guys made 2 great conversations and statements for your players. But as I put in my pick, I will say at 51, I think Jamin Davis out of Kentucky is a no-brainer at this point. You mentioned why we don't need a cornerback. We have 3 strong candidates. I like Jimmy Moreland at the nickel the last few years, but when you look at our linebacker core, it is very, very weak. Right, there's no depth at all between Bostic and Holcomb and Hudson. That's about it. That's all you have. So being able to put Jamin Davis in there, and I forget, I could be butchering his first name. You immediately uplift that position versus what you would do with a Joseph at cornerback, and he wouldn't come in and start over Fuller or Jackson, in my point. But Davis really has an opportunity to push Bostic for some early reps. So with the 51st pick in the second round, Jamin Davis was still there, an absolute steal. Great job, gentlemen, with there. So our first 2 picks, as we kind of roll out this universal mock draft, we have our old tackle, Teven Jenkins, at 19, and then we was able to get the steal, which could arguably be of the draft, at 51, and Jamin Davis, if that happens for us. So, gentlemen, closing out here, I want to thank both of our guests, Matt V and Donovan, for great insight on this very deep offensive class. I would be lying if I said I was this knowledgeable on some of these guys we were talking about tonight, but this is why we do this, right? So you can get some information and then go back and do your own homework. So again, gentlemen, to you guys, if you want to plug anything before we get out of here, here's your opportunity. Matt, we'll start with you.
Go check out my mock draft. Just look up mock draft. It's like 3rd one right now over at Pro Football Network. It's the last one I'll be writing for the year. I have another one up on my YouTube channel eventually before the draft. But yeah, just go check out my stuff on Pro Football Network. Find me on socials at MV Scouting. Follow me on Twitter. We always have a good time. At least I like to think so. But that's really it.
And TikTok.
and
definitely make sure you shout out the TikTok.
Yeah, don't forget TikTok at all. Donovan, what's up, man?
Yeah, appreciate it, guys, for having me on again. You can find me on Twitter at DonnieMac98 and working with Nate a little bit. and Josh for the Burgundy Network podcast and for the Capital Washington Football. So again, still getting my feet wet compared to the other guys on the panel right here. So I'm trying to take as many tips and pointers from them. But again, I appreciate it being on and look forward to doing more work in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. For Nate and myself, again, a great conversation. Please stay tuned. If you're not, follow us on YouTube for all of our draft day content, for our daily drops. We will pick up some of these offensive lineman conversations on the strength of what we talked about here today. Just a lot more content, some player breakdowns coming for our linebacker class. And I think, Nate, please correct me if I'm wrong before I close out. Next week will be the wide receivers. So we'll get back into a great conversation with a very—
That's my bread and butter, baby. There we go.
So look forward to another draft day episode. Nate, Donovan, Matt, my name is Rod. Thanks for watching.